Okay, so this is the Dangerous Edition Sprint 1 review. So the sprint started on January 3rd and went through January 20th. I think part of the thing that we had going on as part of this release was the Core 2.0 work. And so we'll have to take that into account as we look at the stories and to some extent the burn down chart. So I wanted to do a quick review of the sprint. So this is the sprint report that you can see in Jira. For Dangerous Edition. What you'll see here is that it shows the our burn down rate, and I think what we're seeing is that you'll see a huge uptick, and that was when we actually added all the stories. So it looks like most of our stories were added after the sprint was started. So I think one of the things that we're going to have to work on is we're going to have the next sprint this Monday. What I'm going to do is I'm going to plan on closing out this sprint by noon today. That should give you guys about a business day to try to get the stories in for the next sprint. And then from a burn down standpoint, you'll see that there wasn't a huge amount of burn down except kind of towards the end as people were updating their stories. Part of that, I understand, is there were actually a bunch of stories or defects added because of the 2.0 work. And those were getting resolved pretty quickly. So what you'll see is that from a completed issue standpoint, there were some changes in terms of the scoping of the story. So ultimately, we finished 125 of them. But you'll also see that issues not completed was 149 points. And part of this was due to, I think, the work that was on Core 2.0. So some folks were pulled off to fix defects there. And then there were some issues removed from the sprint, which is interesting because some of them were done. So not quite sure why we removed them. Okay, and then let's get back to the review. So we'll start with Core 2.0. I think this was a bunch of different folks. So Andy, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So I tried to summarize what I knew that had been fixed for Core 2.0 release. And so the release was cut yesterday, the 2.0 release. A note went out to the community about that, so hopefully people are checking that out. Some work that we needed to do to get to that point. The Cord ONOS apps were not loading the proper versions. We fixed that. We needed a new ONOS version, and the ONOS team prepped that for us. We needed some small updates to the Cord in a Box script to grab the right repositories, and mainly David and I took a pass over the documentation and brought that up to date. So I think that's it.
And I don't think Ali is here, but I think kudos to Ali for automating the release process. So I think that's it for this. Thanks, Andy. Refactor XOS.
So this is the core API for XOS, which is running in a new XOS container called the XOS core container. It uses gRPC and protobuf. It has a CRUD-like interface, which has create, get, update, delete, and list operations. Currently supporting the entire XOS core API, and it's auto-generated from the data model. We also implemented some security on this because XOS needs to authenticate the user that is performing operations. So we used the built-in gRPC security methods. There was a SSL channel credential, which encrypts the API channel. And then I implemented a call credential, which uses username password authentication. And that authenticates to XOS, which user is performing the operation. This has been tested with Chameleon, although Chameleon doesn't yet have support for authentication, so it only currently supports parts of the XOS API that do not need the authentication feature. and that'll be an item for next sprint is to get that resolved so that we can have authentication through Chameleon.
Okay, thanks, Scott. Refactor XOS UI.
Yeah, we are generating forms for core models, and we are validating the data before they get submitted to XOS. We are populating all the relation in the table views and also in the form. We provided a new full text search mechanism in the UI, so it will be faster to move between related objects. And the most important thing, we added the new UI to the deploy process. So for everyone who is deploying Cord post 2.0, will find the new UI available on the pod. To do this, we've gone through a small cleanup of the old system. So we moved all the access port to 9000 for any configuration, and we had to make the UI configurable at runtime and to update the Apache proxy on the head node. Beyond that, we started documenting the new UI and the process we imagined to onboard the service, but that is something that still needs to be discussed. And that's it.
Okay, thanks, Matteo. Refactor Build Deploy.
So this sprint, I was working on adding virtual fabric to the Cord in a Box. So I spent some time kind of exploring the design space here and considering a number of different designs and getting some feedback from the other developers. So there's a design doc in Google Docs that I think I posted on Slack, the URL. But if anybody's interested, I can point them to that.
Andy, can you go ahead? Sorry. Can you go ahead and add the link to this after the meeting? This way folks can reference it in the slide.
Yeah, I will do that.
As an aside, every one of these things does come out of the roadmap, and the roadmap wiki page ought to include a link to any design documents that are in progress, and there are quite a few there, so that's another place it'd be good to put the link.
Okay, in this doc and on the wiki. Okay. It might be already on the wiki. I think I may have put it there already.
That one, I think, is on the wiki.
Yeah. Okay. So the design I ended up settling on is a simple one. There's the 2-leaf and 2-spine switches. Each has its own vagrant VM, and each VM is running the CPQD software switch. So the topology between the switches is specified in the vagrant file, as opposed to, say, in Mininet or some other way. I did explore Mininet a little bit. I'm not that familiar with Mininet, but I guess I concluded that Mininet wasn't the right tool for this particular task, and you know, the design doc talks about that if anybody's interested. So the current status is I didn't get completely finished with this. I'm at the point where all of the vSwitches come up. They're provisioned by the provisioner. They appear when you type cord prov list or cord switch list. They connect to ONOS. What I still need to do is come up with the right fabric configuration that will get me past the end-to-end test when I create a VSG or example service. So I'm still having some issues there. Maybe next week I might reach out to some people that are more familiar with the fabric to see if they can help me figure out what I'm doing wrong. So that's it for that bullet.
I created the private certificate authority, and which is the next bullet. There's a design implementation doc. It creates a 3-level certificate authority, a root and an intermediate CA, and then leaf certificates for servers and whatnot. Currently, Keystone is using it, and this is going to let us reorder the build so that we can actually start Juju either earlier or bring up XOS and then onboard OpenStack after the fact. And this is ready to be used. In the document, you can see how to generate a certificate with all of the settings you need for that to work. So go ahead and do that. And if you run into issues with SSL or authentication, I can probably help out with that on Slack.
Okay, thanks, Andy, Zach. Next, for Refactor Build deploy.
Okay, so the first item here is Docker container images loaded into the local Docker registry and fetched from that registry onto the head node. So I went through the list of containers that seem to be used in a typical XOS installation. Most of them were already taken care of. The only two noteworthy things were Node and Nginx. So I have updated those two. The next bullet item is, and I should mention on that previous bullet item, if you need an additional Docker image pulled in for a new service or something, you can ask me on Slack, and I will tell you the appropriate places to go. Add those to the right build.gradle and the scripts and platform install for future services and new containers. The next bullet item is all repositories needed by XOS pushed from the dev node to the head node. So what we did here is we pushed the entire repo tree from the dev node to the head node. It ends up in /opt/cord. That directory is volume mounted into the XOS onboarding synchronizer, which is where we will have the services so that they can pull stuff from it. It also is mounted into all other XOS containers, although it's not clear that that is necessary, and next sprint I'm going to be looking at that and seeing if we can eliminate it being mounted in places that it might not be needed. Currently, legacy XOS directories, for example, the XOS services, XOS libraries, service profile and such, are linked to /opt/cord. That preserves all existing service onboarding recipes working. And next sprint, I'm planning on doing an item that will be to update all existing services so that they pull directly from the opt/cord directory rather than pulling through those legacy directories that are linked to opt/cord. That's it for this item.
Scott, one quick question.
Sure.
So once we link up the service synchronizers to this opt/cord, does that mean that if we make some changes in the synchronizer files of that service, will they directly reflect into the synchronizer container so that we don't need to rebuild or anything?
No, that's not quite what it means. So there's still going to be an onboarding process where you will onboard a synchronizer or you will onboard a service, and the primary place where this directory gets used is going to be inside the onboarding synchronizer, so it can pull those files from that hierarchy and then go off and create your synchronizer container. So that's something that I hadn't thought about, mounting this into the synchronizers directly and running the code from there. I can see how that would be useful from a developer's perspective. I am thinking we need to flesh out more design work on how onboarding is going to work this for this next release, because there may be some other changes that we're going to be doing. In particular, synchronizers will start to use the new core API rather than having Django code pushed directly into them. So I expect some major reorganization there.
Okay, thanks.
Refactor Build deploy.
I worked on this, and Andy had some input too. There's a build deploy redesign document in Google Docs. Basically, we wanted it's a work in progress, so I'd really like people to take a look at it. Basically, the big change is that we're going to try to build as many containers in a generic fashion as possible and then customize them at deploy time, which currently we're kind of smashing the build process and the deploy process together, and this helps separate those two concerns. So look it over. It's linked there, and I'd really like to get some feedback so we can go forward on making that a reality soon.
Okay, thanks, Zach. Platform support for eCord. I think there was a story around integration of pseudo wiring to eCord, but I noticed it was still in the to-do phase. So we'll move on to Fabric features and improvements.
So, Gerald, did you write the first one? Yeah, I have started writing a document about the design of the HA for BRouter, which is a feature that is on the roadmap for Dangerous Edition. So that's still work in progress, but I've done a bit of work on that, and hopefully we'll use that to create some of the Jira stories that will go into next sprint. So, okay. And also, this week we deliver a version 2 Comcast that has a lot of features integrated together, including SIM routing, BRouter, AAA, and GCP related app. And also, we are working on IPv6 support. Most of them are reviewed. I think there are still some of them in Garrett. We hope we can merge it by the end of the day. I'm also working on VLAN support. What I've done is I introduced more VLAN types in the interface config because currently we only have one VLAN and it doesn't really the meaning of that value is quite ambiguous and it's application dependent. So I put more VLAN types in there and it's under review. And also I've updated the documentation related to Fabric for mysterious decision. I think that's all.
Thanks, Charles. Jenna. Expand QA coverage?
So this is you. What we have done in this sprint, we added a set of sanity tests for the core APIs, and which is now in the code tester repo, and we use front-end configuration for these tests. We also created a Jenkins pipeline job to run these tests. So that means every time there is a change submitted to both either service provider or XOS repo, that Jenkins job will be triggered and bring up front end and run the tests, and then post the result to Garrett as a comment. So, and work in progress, we are still trying to run code tester tests from Sienna on Code in a Box. That's it.
Thank you. Monitoring as a service? Srikanth?
Yeah, so in this sprint, one significant activity that I forgot to note down here is the documentation, the wiki documentation for monitoring service. We have documented the architecture, design level details, and user guide, and what are the various probes that are being collected by this monitoring service inside the code. So all that information is updated into the wiki. I would encourage people to look at that and give us feedback on how it is. I mean, at least it is clear to them on whether they can enable the monitoring for their services or not, whether the documentation. So that is one activity. The other one, what we have done in this sprint is for a reference implementation for other services. We enabled monitoring for example service, which is one sample service that we have inside the code in a box. So we have, if you see this diagram, so we have the example service running on the optcode in a box. So we implemented a monitoring agent for that service, and we implemented a plugin that collects the data from that service and verify whether the metrics are appearing in the dashboard. So it is pretty easy task to enable monitoring for any service. I will point you to the Gerrit patch that enables some monitoring for this service, so that if you just follow those code changes in your service, it's straightforward. Another minor change that we did is for the inside the monitoring service. Today we heavily leverage the OpenStack Ceilometer, and we realized that we were the original path of monitoring service was whenever it receives the data from the southbound elements, it parses, normalizes, and transforms the data and puts it into another RabbitMQ queue such that the Ceilometer data persister will persist them in a database. We realized that the latest Ceilometer has a feature where it can directly write into the database, thereby avoiding some certain load on this RabbitMQ, additional load on the RabbitMQ. So this is one change to reduce the load on the RabbitMQ message queues, where the these Ceilometer data handlers directly writes into the MongoDB.
Does that mean that Ceilometer now has to understand the schema as opposed to just kind of the message schema? It understands the database schema, and every time that monitoring schema is changed, that Ceilometer read has to change as well?
No, the schema is here. So the Ceilometer data handlers understand the schema coming from the network elements. And so this parsing functionality of this data handler is to understand that schema and normalize this into a Ceilometer sample format before putting into the database. What we are eliminating here is an additional daemon which writes into the database, and the communication between that additional daemon and this data handler so far was RabbitMQ. So it unnecessarily creates additional load on the RabbitMQ message queue, which is a small optimization, but I thought, okay, let's eliminate it when they are not required.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Shrikant.
So if possible, I will show the demo for this monitoring service, example service monitoring at the end of the session.
Okay. Arcord. I think the only thing we had flagged as Arcord was the Apache proxy story, which Matteo had covered under the UI refactoring. And then Volta. I think there was definitely some work on the Volta southbound, but my assumption is folks are busy on that side. eCord. Utah or Mark?
They are not here.
Utah is online.
So the only progress is listed there. So we now have the server for the second and the third central office. So we've started installing the code 2.0 and having issue, but we'll talk about that later. And there was some closed source apps which are now about to be open source. That's about it.
Okay, thanks, Utah. MCord integration, Ping Ping?
Hi, we fixed the MCord service profile in 2.0, in Cloud 2.0, and we finished the SQL and MME service finally. And for the each service, we can put up two micro VMs. Since, for example, the SQL we have control plan VM and data plan VM. So this is what we have done this sprint.
Okay. Ping Ping, I noticed that you're committing to the Core 2.0 branch. So is the plan for all the MCord work to stay on Core 2.0 for the demo?
Indeed, we push all our changes to both master and 2.0. Right now we are testing on 2.0 and make sure the demo will work on 2.0. We didn't test on master. We just push our code, give another copy to master.
For MWC, we will use the core 2.0. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Then no updates on V10. Okay, so the last thing is Dangerous Edition, Sprint 2. That will start beginning next Monday. It's a 3-week sprint ending on February 10th. We will have the sprint planning next Monday at 2 p.m. A couple of notes around Jira. Please add a fixed version to Jira stories that you are closing in the sprint. Because what we can do is we can actually auto-generate some of the release notes based upon it. But the fixed version will really help for folks to understand what's going into the releases. And then the other thing is, as you're adding your commits to Gerrit, please prefix your commits with the Jira story number. This way we can do some association. Okay, and then we'll move on to demos. We have the Cord GUI demo and then a monitoring. So let me go ahead and make Mateo a presenter. Okay.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So this is the Cord UI. You have already seen it in December. What we added this sprint is to populate all the relation in the list, so you can easily navigate between different models. And we are auto-generating the form. Now let's get as a live form, and they're fully functional now, so you can start creating and updating files, and they have a sort of validation on the client, so you won't even send bad data to the server. And the other feature we introduced is this small form on the top, where you can start searching for a component in XOS, so you can navigate really easily between models and views. And for any result, you have the description of the type of the result that you're going to view while clicking on it. And last thing, this is deployed in Cord in a box on Cloud Lab. It will come up automatically. You can just go to the port 8080/SPA, and you can log in and start using and finding bugs in the new UI. So I really encourage you all to start moving to this one and give me feedback.
So Matthew, sorry, can I?
No, that's it. Go ahead, Shuriken.
Yeah, so to migrate the existing views and dashboard to this GUI, do we need to do anything, some additional work, or once we migrate to this GUI, they're all automatically upgraded to this part?
So you are referring to the service dashboard, like the monitoring dashboard, right?
Right.
So that is not yet available in the new UI. We need to finish the design discussion on how to onboard the services. But regarding the UI, there will be a small amount of work to migrate the existing views, but we use the same framework and the same structure, so it is just a different way to onboard them.
Okay.
And on this topic, I know that this is a big discussion that needs to happen, but I've seen on the mailing list that a lot of people are starting working on new services. So it will be better to finish this discussion as soon as possible before we have too many services with the old onboarding mechanism.
Okay. So are there any differences in the technologies used in this UA versus the old GUI? I mean, earlier we were using Angular something, right? Were there any change of?
Was based on Django that was auto-generating the core views, but it had some limitation in supporting multiple XOS instance. That is a feature required by eCord, and it has some issues with real-time notification. This version is completely done with AngularJS, and it is still auto-generating all the core UI, and there is a plan to auto-generate the CRUD views for the services also.
Okay.
Okay, if no other questions, let's move on to the next demo. Okay, thanks, Matteo.
Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to show you the demo for this enabling monitoring for code example surveys. So let me log into the code. So when you log into the XOS UI or code UI, you will see this monitoring dashboard that will currently show you the various telemetry collected for each of these elements inside the code. So we have different services, we have some infrastructure. So for example, right now, if I go into the example service, what you see here, there is some telemetry data being collected for this example service resources. So there are the naming is little looking weird, but this is a virtual machine created for that particular service, and these are the network interfaces attached to that particular virtual machine. So what you are seeing here is currently so in my code in a box, I enabled infra monitoring. So because of that, it is collecting various infrastructure level metrics for that particular service. When we say infrastructure, it shows you what is the CPU usage, disk usage, or memory usage, various information that is already being collected from the OpenStack services. So these are of type Nova. So what we did one another thing is you can drill down into each of these things to identify how the various samples being collected for that particular virtual machine utilization. So what I will do right now is, so now I want to collect some of the service specific KPIs from that example service. So for this demo, we have included, since there is an Apache server running inside example service, so we wanted to collect how that Apache server is performing. So I will do make enable example service monitoring. So when I execute this command, what it does is it will service compose the example service and the monitoring service such that example service can feed its data into the monitoring service. So if I refresh the oops, okay. Let me see if make enable VSG monitoring, if that works. Okay, seems something is not working here. Yeah, looks like something is working. So the expectation is when we enable the service level monitoring, we should start seeing the metrics of service specific. Instead of infrastructure, you will see some service level metrics for that particular service. What is the Apache number of requests that is received, and how is the load on that particular service. So those type of metrics should appear here. Looks like some issue currently. Yeah, it's not working. Sorry for that. Yeah, I think I don't have anything to show.
Okay, thanks, Srikanth. So a reminder that we will be closing this sprint at noon. So please go and update the fixed version on stories that you're closing in this sprint. And then the other item was Utah. You mentioned issues around Core 2.0. I don't know if you had wanted to bring it up in this forum or you're planning to discuss it elsewhere. Okay, I guess not. So we can always discuss it at stand up too. So thanks everyone for coming to the review, and please update your tickets and plans for Sprint 2. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.